I haven't been around ESCO. I have been there 35 years, but I was telling somebody earlier that doesn't make me that old. I'm number 84 on the seniority list there. So we don't, when people come to work there, they typically stay, like I did when I started there in 1972. Say I was ran into a young guy at our church the other day, and he was mentioning that he'd heard that I was going to be speaking to this group, and he said, gosh, what an opportunity. And I thought about those words afterwards, and I think what he meant was what an opportunity for me. I don't typically speak at events like this. I'm usually speaking to a group of employees or some type of a downtown policy session or some darn thing, and trying to motivate people and etc. So I usually don't get a chance to talk to folks from a different background than I have. I came from a manufacturing and engineered products type of a background, and as I understand it, a lot of you folks are out here from the Intel area, from Nike, places out here in the Beaverton area. So it's an opportunity for me to be exposed to some different people and grow, so I thank you. And as Disraeli said one time, I think it was Disraeli that said this, that adversity is the best teacher. So getting yourself exposed to different groups is great. What I wanted to do for a few minutes that we have together today is, as Chris said, I have been knocking around the business world for 35 years, and hopefully you learn a few things during that time. And I just wanted to share a few thoughts on, how do you grow a company, and especially in today's age, how do you grow individual leaders within a company? I am getting up towards the autumn of my professional career, and I have to have leaders coming along in order to retire someday. And how do you grow those leaders? And then most importantly, how do you grow yourself? Particularly in the age that we have today of globalization and standardization, things that put a lot of pressure on you. They can destroy your individualism, and they can even destroy your soul if you're not careful. And how do you grow yourself and your soul during these times? Give you a little background, because most people think of give you a little background on the company that I work for. I think when most people, if they've heard of ESCO, they think of a little foundry down in northwest Portland on the side of the old ballpark that used to be down there, and they think that's all ESCO is. Well, actually, ESCO started back in 1913 with 13 employees, and now we have 26 plants on all 6 continents, and about close to 4,000 employees, and in a number of different businesses. But those businesses all produce parts that wear out. They're highly engineered components made out of low alloy steel and super alloy steels that go into mining equipment, construction equipment, and jet engines and industrial gas turbines, that type of thing. Parts that wear out, which is what very important to us, to take the cyclicality out of the business. Well, we started out back in 1913 by an entrepreneur, and he had a couple of characteristics. One, he had a real belief in people and what people can bring and the value of people. And as I mentioned, he was entrepreneurial. He took risk. He would risk his money and his family welfare, family funds, to invest and grow business and provide family-wage jobs. That was very important to him. And as time went on, we developed a couple of other competencies. One was in metallurgy, the melting and refining and heat treating and of steel and other alloys. And then we also developed a competency which is really what ESCO is, the soul of the company, and that is that we take our sales force, and we have a widely distributed sales force. We give them exclusive territories like the state of Illinois or the state of Wyoming or Montana or Idaho or whatever. And they work with our engineers and get out where the products are being used and interface with the people that are using it. They don't really stop at the purchasing office or the engineering. They get out into the field where those products are being used and establish a relationship with those users of our products and what it is they want. And then bring that back and design things and fine-tune the products. And it drives the need for that product all the way back up to the machine manufacturers that produce it. And it creates a market for us that we then service through our exclusive distributors around the world. We call that customer-driven product innovation. And if we ever lost that, we would lose who we are as a company. That's the soul, it's the heart and soul of the company. You've got to drive that. It's that people-to-people relationship and the engineering talent that we bring to it. There's parts to our culture, again, besides that customer-driven product innovation, but it's that original belief in people and treating them fairly. The informality of our organization. That's always on a first-name basis. Walk in and talk to anybody you want, anytime. I've always been that way. But then, in addition to all that, is holding people accountable for results. If they say you're going to do something, then we expect it to be delivered. So holding people accountable is very important, in addition to the fairness and informality. And then, one of the things that originally drew me to the company in the first place back in 1972 was the opportunity to maintain a balance in my life. Besides working, I was always encouraged to spend time with my family, to spend times with others, to spend time doing things that I like to do besides work. And if it was seen that I was getting off balance and spending too much time at work, someone would always sit down and talk to me about that, get me back on balance. Because it was felt that I'd be better for the company and better for myself if I maintained that balance. And that's, as you'll see in my comments here in a few minutes, that's something that we continue to really drive. Those of you at Intel or at Nike or basically any company that's particularly ones that are manufacturing and distributing a product on a global basis. The last 15 years or so have brought tremendous change in globalization. This world is getting smaller, obviously. Products move freely across borders now. Much more competition. You can't afford to have any waste. You have to streamline your processes. You have to standardize things. And it's tough to maintain individualism. It's tough to maintain your creativity in that kind of an environment. And ESCO is going through those exact same changes that everybody else is. And believe me, if you don't respond to them, and you don't keep alert and keep lean and maintain your drive for global growth, you're not going to survive in the long run. Give you a little background on myself. I'm probably the oldest of the boomers. I was born in 1946, and that was really the beginning of the baby boomers. I grew up in the Northwest in a small town, so I kind of have small town values. My parents, my dad came home from the war and married my mother, and as my father tells us very affectionately, the baby came along 10 months later. So you mean me, Dad? Yeah. And so they didn't have much, and I had to work hard. And Dad educated himself. Of course, he had a high school education, but he got a college education and worked a couple jobs. And that was the work ethic was very much instilled in me through my father and my mother. But we had a lot of as was typical of those times, we had a lot of talk around the dinner table. And we always had, always sat down. My brother came along eventually, and the four of us would always have time around the dinner table at night to talk. And that's where a lot of my values came from. I was taught to save. You know, it drives my wife nuts, but we still continue to save. Obviously was taught the value of honesty, politeness. Those were just different kinds of values that were instilled by my parents. There was a lot of discipline. You know, my parents were very strict, but this might sound like a contradiction. They were very disciplined, but yet I had a lot of freedom. Back then, you know, you didn't have to worry about your kids going outside and playing in the field or going down in the canyon and building forts and things like that. You had a lot of freedom. And that combination of discipline and freedom is something I'll talk about in a few more minutes, because it's something that we try to do within our company also. I had very little real spiritual guidance, and other than I was baptized when I was a young kid, and I had a godmother, and she was a wonderful lady, and I learned a lot from her. And then when I got married, my wife had given me a lot of spiritual guidance. Education was very important within our family, and I was encouraged to go on and get an education, but given the freedom to decide where it was I was going to go and what discipline I was going to pursue. Joined ESCO in 1972, and I told you what drew me to it, but besides the way they treated people, I also liked the fact that they made something tangible, that they made a product. You know, engineer by background, I like to make things and produce things rather than provide services. Not that there's anything wrong with providing services, but I just enjoy building things. So that attracted me to them. And started here in Portland, and we were here about 3 months, and then my wife was expecting our first child, and right after that we moved back to Illinois. And anyway, I was moving around with the company a lot in different assignments, and was always advised to think big, to think outside the box, to take risk, and one of the most important pieces of advice that I remember ever hearing was to trust my instincts, you know, to trust my judgment, to leave my mark on the company, and and then lastly to keep a balance. And you know, we've been in the company's been in business for over 90 years now, and I'm only the 6th CEO, so every one of them has been allowed to have a pretty good long run, and every one of them has left their own distinct mark on the company. And it's quite obvious the mark that I'm going to be leaving on it, and that is to when I joined the company, one of the things that I really, besides making a product and maintaining a balance, one of the things I liked about it was a lot of independence. So if I was back running a plant in Illinois, I kind of ran my own show. If I was down running a plant in Mississippi, I did my own thing down there. You know, I wanted to increase somebody's pension plan, I just did. And if I wanted to go out and make a contribution to the city of Newton, Mississippi, I just did that. I made all those decisions myself. I ran my own little operation. So we did not have a lot of discipline or structure. And I'm having to move the company, unfortunately, to a more formal, process-oriented, disciplined organization. And then how do you do that and still maintain the creativity and that people have and the innovation that they have? How do you put those two things together? And how do you keep that soul of the company that I had mentioned to you? You know, that customer-driven product innovation, people in the field, feet on the ground, talking with customers face to face. It's because it's our people that sell our products, and that relationship and the trust. That's the soul of the company. So, I said I would say just a few words about, you know, how you grow a company, and then I'll get in and talk a little bit about how do you grow individuals, and we'll talk about ourselves for just a few minutes. But as I said, I've been putting more discipline into the company, you know, making sure that it's well understood what our mission. Most of this stuff is going to be pretty straightforward to most of you, so I'm going to go through it quickly. But you obviously have to have a mission, and you have to have all your employees understand what that mission is. And that's not as easy as it sounds. You know? You get out and communicate it. And I communicate that myself personally, one-on-one, with all of our employees, you know, by visiting all those sites and making sure they understand who we are and what we're all about, what our values are, what our value proposition is, what it is that we deliver to our customers. What are our goals? And not just the goals this year, but what is it we're trying to achieve over the next 4 or 5 years? And then what are the 6 or 7 key strategies that we follow? And then what is it we're working on this year? What are the initiatives that we're working on this year that support those strategies? And you always want to have those initiatives, those goals, have a lot of stretch in them. And you know, that takes a while to get that. When you go to your board of directors and you give them an annual plan, you want to be able to achieve that. So, and so how do you keep from sandbagging? And you know, over the years, I now put just a little bit more stretch in there than I think we can achieve. And so the board is used to us not quite reaching those goals, but they know that. That we have an agreement that has a lot of stretch in it, because I want our employees to have stretch. And we are, again, going forward, building a culture of discipline, and we're doing that through lean initiatives. Over the last 7 or 8 years, we've had an initiative in place to lean up our processes, to have standard ways of approaching things, and plant by plant, we're putting that in, so that if you're running a plant back in Syracuse, New York, and we move you down to run our plant in Minas Gerais, Brazil, you'll use basically the same approach to running that plant, so we can move people around and grow them and develop them for future leadership of the company. We get our individual, let's talk about growing individual leaders now. As I say, we have around about close to 4,000 employees. We have about 150 individuals, men and women, that we're watching and developing. And we put a school together for them every year and bring in about 25 to 30 and get them together for a week, 4 times a year, and I spend most of that week with them. And one of the things that I really preach to them is the belief in the goodness of others. I mean, if you look around this room, everybody wants to do a good job. Everybody's a good person. You know, I mean, and you got to draw the value out of them. Belief in have a belief in the basic goodness of others. And treat people that way. We have a list of desired competencies that we want our folks to have, and we do a 360 review of those folks and assess them against those competencies, and then put development plans together for them. But most importantly, we give them stretch assignments. Maybe they were in charge of engineering in one of our facilities, and we'll send them down to be in charge of sales in Brazil. and expect them to learn another language, to establish relationships with people, sell our products, grow, move their family down there. The family doesn't want to move, obviously, but just keep stretching them and growing them. Give them a lot of exposure to mentors and to coaches and senior executives all the way up to the board of directors. Make them stand on their feet. Make them, put them up in front of the board of directors. Have the board ask them questions. How do you respond to it? How do you stand on your own 2 feet? Grow through that. And if you're not willing to do that, then maybe you're best where you are. But just keep putting people into stretch assignments and growing them. And then lastly, one of the things I personally tell people is don't define your life strictly by your job or by your business, or even or by your family, or by sports. Don't define it by that, because those things are fleeting, unfortunately. Your business career is going to come to an end someday. You're going to have ups and downs. It's not going to make you happy in the long run. Even your family, your children, they can disappoint you. They can let you down. You're not always going to be happy just because of you have a spouse and children. That's not going to make you happy all the time. So try to keep a balance in your life between work, your spiritual life, your children, your sports, and so forth. But also find something that gives you joy in the long run. Let's talk about individuals, and I'll just talk about myself for a while. Probably figured out by now I'm 60 years old, and I've always tried to look long term. Again, kind of drives my wife and daughters nuts, but I've always had kind of a long term plan. Try not to focus just on the short term. I guess to use an overused phrase, life is a marathon and it's not a sprint. I'm getting into the later parts of that marathon now, and I realize that it's not about winning the sprint or winning the marathon. It's about how you ran the race and how you developed your character during that run. And also recognize that happiness comes from many things, but they can crumble. I've had a fairly successful career, but that's not and the material things that have come from that is not what makes me happy. It's believe me. You all know you get a paycheck, or maybe you get a good bonus one year and you're happy for maybe a few hours. Maybe you go out and buy a boat with it or something. That's going to make you happy. The engine fails, or you knock the prop off or whatever. Now you're unhappy again. Those things do not provide happiness in the long run. You got to decide what it is that does make you happy, and then put a plan together for yourself to achieve that. What is it that's going to develop your character? What is it that's going to give you comfort in the long run? What is it that's going to give you joy in the long run? And then if there's some things that you need to do to achieve that, do them. Put down a list of priorities and do them. For instance, we had a guy who ran one of our major divisions, and I had brought him into the company a lot, 20-some years ago. We had a very close relationship. And he had some things going on in his life with some problems his spouse had, and he was very distracted for a long time. And finally, I had to do something. And so I flew back. He lived in Syracuse, New York. I flew back there and sat down and talked with him. And I told him that it was time for him to leave. It was time for him to retire. And I was going to make it fair for him. But we needed to separate. And it was best for him. and got up, he was crying, gave me a hug, and thanked me, and and it has been best for him. And it's been about 3 or 4 months ago, and I knew that I needed to talk to him. I needed to give him a call before too much time went by. So I put a note on my desk and I said, "Call Perry." And I picked up the phone one day and I called Perry because I knew I needed to talk to him. And it was probably the best conversation that I've ever had, with an individual. And we renewed our acquaintance, and we'll keep our acquaintance. But it's those priorities, those things that are important in your life, do them. That old friend of mine, 83, 4 years old, I deer and elk hunted with for years. Loved the guy. Had an 8th grade education. Used to sit around the campfire. We had a deep, deep relationship. Unfortunately, he died here just before Christmas, and left a widow, and she was younger than him, and she's gotten cancer now, and that's something that I know I need to do, is to get out and see her every once in a while. It's not an easy thing to do, but for my character and my soul, I need to do that. And so about every couple of weeks, I'll call Betty and I'll go out and sit down and talk to her. I always give her a hug, and it's not easy, because she's dying, and that's obvious, and it's not easy to visit people like that. But it's good for me, a lot more for me than it is for her, I'm sure. So it's important to keep grounded. It's important to keep grounded in what's important to you. Not even what's important to your family or your spouse or your children, but what's important to you in the long run. What's important to your character, and follow up on those things. I happen to be a person of faith. That's very important to me. It helps keep me grounded. I think, it's important to belong to a faith community. Someone you can talk to, like, share ideas in a non-threatening environment. Just talk. And that's very hard for men, especially. To talk about those kind of things. It's hard to find people that you can talk to about those kind of things. So when you find some, hang on to them, because it's important for you as an individual. And then lastly, the thing that helps keep me grounded is prayer. Prayer is I'm not a real prayerful person, but it is important to me. I need it. We went through Chris mentioned we have 3 grandsons. We did have 4 for a while. My youngest daughter had very premature twins, and we lost one after a few days. It's the hardest thing that our family's ever gone through, and prayer got me through that. It's very important to me personally to help keep me grounded. And as I say, I'm not very prayerful, but I need it once in a while. That's very important to me. So Roger and Chris encouraged me to leave a little time for questions, and hopefully we have a few. Roger, it's about time for questions? Yeah, okay. Chris? Yes?
Your company, a public company, how do you deal with being a public company?
The question is our company a public company, and how do you deal with being a public company? No, we are not a public company. We're privately held. However, just before the end of the year, we did do an ESOP, an employee stock ownership program. Sold a fairly small portion of the company, and as part of that, you go out and sell bonds to finance the acquisition. You do a road show, and you're kind of semi-public. And so we have quarterly analyst calls now, and a lot of the same things that public companies go through. So yeah, it is it is harder to maintain your privacy and your individualism and so forth when you've got a broad base of shareholders asking you questions and real curious about what your quarterly results were and on and on and on. But you know, we will maintain our long-term view on things. Yes?
Around Oregon, are there particular companies that stand out, that live their values in ways that you admire?
The question was, when I look around Oregon, are there other companies that live their values? I think that's what you, yeah. That's an interesting question. The one that comes to my mind is Stimson Lumber. They're another kind of a quiet company and not too many people know about. But they have operations in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Montana. They have about 16 mills and 500,000 acres of timber. Long-held family company, and I'm pretty familiar with them and the way they run things. I'd say they're a very value-centered organization also. I think I'm pretty familiar with Blunt, the old Oregon saw chain company, and the way that they run things there. And I would say they're another company that's similar in the way that they approach things.
Question?
Yes?
You talked about hiring employees according to their key competencies. Besides specific job skills or knowledge, what kinds of competencies attract you in an employee?
Oh boy, the question was, what kind of competencies do we look for, and it's not just an employee, but what do we look for in leaders, you know? And we sat around and talked about that for a long time. There's books that are on that subject, and they'll have like 160 different competencies, I believe it is, that you can, So what are the dozen or so that are important to you as a company? I thought maybe somebody might ask me that, so I brought this thing from, we call it leading the way. That's what our classes that we give to people. And I'm not going to read all of these, but first one is faith in yourself. Yeah. The big picture thinking. Dealing with ambiguity. Man, that is a really tough one. Believe me, the higher you go in the organization, the more ambiguous things get to go. It's, when you're a kid and you're mowing the lawn, somebody paid you $1.50 to mow their lawn, and you took an hour and a half and you clipped it, and you were done. You got your $1.50, you went home. Now, it takes 5-6 years to get something done. So it's a very, how do you deal with that as an individual, that ambiguity? Curiosity is something that's asking questions and being not afraid to ask dumb questions. Big picture thinking, I might have already mentioned. Creativity is very important. Personal ownership. If you take something on, don't be blaming others. That's what you own the situation. Perseverance is sticking with things. An ability to keep a lot of balls in the air. And again, the higher you go in an organization, the more balls you have in the air at any one time. So how do you delegate some of those things out and keep all the plates spinning? You got to keep them all spinning and not let any of them fall. And we watch people. How do they handle those kinds of things? Yes.
You talk about innovation is important to your company.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep individuals to keep fostering innovation and to keep on their toes? You talk about working with the customer, but are there any internal programs or any internal materials?
Yeah, the question was, how do we maintain innovativeness and that's I don't know that I can put any one answer to that, but it's just kind of it's part of our culture, and I was talking to a young woman here earlier. Where is she still here? Sylvia, I think her name. Yeah, Sylvia. You worked there as an intern when you came out of Cal Poly, I understand, and as a, I assume it was an engineering internship. Yeah, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you said you really enjoyed that internship, and you were probably given a lot of running room. Yeah, exactly. I'd be surprised if you weren't, and you're just allowed to make your own decisions and take risk. As I said, we don't have a lot of structure or formality, but you're rapidly made aware of what it is that we're trying to achieve as an organization, what your department's trying to achieve, what part you play in it. You're given some tools. Gosh, we give you the best tools we can in terms of CAD and CAM and finite element analysis and solid modeling and all that kind of stuff. We're taught how to use those tools, and then given a broad parameter of what it is that we'd like you to achieve, and then go for it. And then, as I said, you've got to own the results. Hopefully that gives you a bit, but it's not. We don't do a lot of training. It's you expect you to come to work with basic skills and values, and then giving you the room to run. Yes.
With the pressure of globalization,
Yeah.
how do you maintain balance across the company? So many pressures of cheaper labor and all that around the world.
Yeah, with the pressures of globalization, how do you maintain balance? I want to make sure I understand what you mean by that. You mean how do we maintain operations in North America, for instance, when there's global price pressure and so forth? Is that what you're?
Or when there's such competition from other companies that maybe don't have a value balance within your corporation, how do you keep the competitive edge against those other companies?
Right. Well, that's why it is so very important, to keep that creativity and innovativeness and the intellectual property into whatever it is, either the product you're making or the way that you service the market. You got to be creative, and maintain that trust and relationship with the end customer, or else you're just going to become commoditized, and people are just going to buy strictly on price, and then you're just dead. You got to keep putting intellectual property into it. And that's why we need people who think that way and are always looking for ways to make things better, and you're constantly innovating and improving. Yes?
You said you don't do a lot of training, but briefly, how do you propagate and infuse your corporate culture into all of your workforce?
Yeah, how do you propagate and infuse your culture into your workforce? Well, as I said earlier, we have there's 26 sites and 3,600 employees. Of the employees here in Portland, we have 800 or 900. I personally know most of them, because I get out and walk and I talk to those, and I visit all of our sites, once or twice a year, and get out and you walk the talk, and that's just, and so I do that. So then people, the plant managers and so forth, see me do that, so they know that's the way we should be doing that, and they meet with their employees in large group meetings, at least once a month. They're out on the shop floor every day, walking the talk, and spreading that culture down through the organization. You can't do it sitting behind a desk, believe me, and I hate sitting behind a desk. Yes?
As a global company, maybe you can give me some insight into in America and Oregon specifically, there's a viewpoint that we're not taxing enough, that we're doing corporate welfare, especially in the Republican administration, and but I don't, and when I see the arguments, I don't actually know when I look and see, is it, do you feel more comfortable doing business in the U.S., and would you, what could the U.S. do to make it more comfortable for you in comparison to another country where the tax things are different? And I don't actually, I guess my question is, what are the real tax differences between some other countries and here?
Well, I guess we'd boil that question down to what are the real tax differences between the U.S. and other
Are we really taxing too much? Are we hurting ourselves, or are we not?
Okay. Chris, you and Roger promised me this wouldn't be a political breakfast here. But, you know, I think that's an age-old question, you know. I mean, that goes, just to try to answer that question somewhat quickly. If you really, you know, Western Europe, you're just not going to invest in Western Europe anymore because they're legislating everything and taking the ability to be creative out of the system. I would continue to invest in North America because of, you know, it's a capitalistic, it still is a capital, you know, we're still capitalistic. We still believe in rewarding people for going out and investing and taking a risk and creating jobs for people. And I personally believe that that's where most of the taxation should be. You know, reward investors with reasonable capital gains rates for investing and creating jobs, and then tax the people that have the jobs and create the jobs, because they're educating their kids, they're building the roads that they need, they're putting in the power grids that they need and so forth. But you need people to invest to create the jobs, to create the tax base. And then when people like myself and others retire, and they hopefully have some wherewithal that they've gotten from their career, then tax that. You know, but don't kill the goose that lays the golden egg. You know? And that's really what they believe in Southeast Asia and places like that. So that's why a lot of investment's moving over there. They need the jobs. Yeah. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.